Um, One second. Yeah, today has been a topsy-turvy day for me. Sorting it out, fixing things, putting things in the right place. Happy birthday, Dr. Jace! Everybody, please wish Dr. Jace a happy birthday. Thank you so much, Dr. Jace, for being such a pillar of our community, of the queer community, and a strong advocate for mental health. We really appreciate you, and I hope your birthday is wonderful. And yeah, just getting shit done around the house, and then I got a letter today saying that I did not get the PhD position at Karlstad University, unfortunately. So, fun. Um, we keep on trying, though. I don't know if there's any point in me continuing to try, but you know, maybe one day. One day it'll work out. So how is everybody doing? Is everybody well? Have you eaten something? Have you taken your meds? Have you fed yourself today? And if not, please go and do any one of those things. And if all else fails, please say something kind about yourself, because, you know, we live in a hellscape of people trying to make us feel less than. So I've shared the links on Twitch and YouTube to friends and family, and today we continue with Why I Am No Longer Talking to White People About Race by Reni Eddo-Lodge. And we are continuing the talk about white privilege. I want to just get a sense of what you guys think. What is white privilege to you? What do you understand by the term white privilege? And you can put your answers in the chat. You can just let me know what is white privilege to you, and then I can ask a follow-up question to that. And then, to answer your earlier question, be Essie nail polish, especially with their gel-like top coat. Essie is the best nail polish I've ever used. So, yeah. It's Essie. Essie. So Nope says it's the unearned social, economic, and cultural advantages that white people benefit from in, I would assume, society, built on racial prejudice. Exactly. Yes. Unearned racial privilege. I mean, the unearned advantages. Absolutely. It's the equivalent of a handout, you know? And a lot of white people like to believe that they don't have white privilege because they don't want to admit that they've had this unearned advantage, they've had this handout. And so that they can continue living in this, I wouldn't even call it blissful, but this ignorance that their entire structure that they live in is entirely their own work. I would say that in a society that values individualism and praises, bootstrap culture, the idea is you've built everything by yourself. The idea is if you haven't made anything of yourself, it's a personal failing, and never a structural one. So yeah, and Gonzo says, white people don't understand the differences in social privileges. They're too busy conflating different privileges to pretend their white privilege doesn't exist. Exactly. And then a follow-up. How does white privilege manifest? Nope says, yep, which is why disability or marginalization of any kind is seen as a moral failing. Yes. And that includes things like being overweight, or like having skin conditions, or having like bad teeth, or anything like that. It's never seen as a structural problem. Obesity is a cause of the cause of obesity is mostly structural, because there's little to no access to healthy food in many areas, and to certain people where a can of Arizona iced tea is cheaper than having clean water coming out of your tap. So all of that put together does make the system of privilege and the system of marginalization intricately linked to how the structures provide and protect people, and who they protect and who they provide for. So yeah, being obese is seen as a personal moral failing, when being thin and quote unquote conventionally beautiful is seen as a personal success, rather than a set of structures aimed at benefiting one group of people over another. So I want you to think about, and maybe don't answer right now, but how does it manifest in your life? How does privilege, white privilege specifically, manifest in your life? And then we are starting on page 98, chapter 3, What is White Privilege? In theory, nobody has a problem with anti-racism. In practice, as soon as people start doing anti-racist things, there is no end to the slew of commentators who are convinced anti-racists are doing it wrong. It even happens among people who consider themselves to be progressive. In The Weekly Worker in 2014, socialist writer Charlie Winstanley wrote of his utter disdain at an argument about race that had taken place in his activist group. As such, he wrote, oppressed groups sit at the center of every discussion, backed by the unquestionable moral weight of their subjective life experience, reinforced by an unaccountable structure of etiquette, which they can use to totally control the flow of discourse. Oof. That's problematic. He continued as a form of unassailable priesthood, basing their legitimacy on the doctrine of original sin. That is gross. To extend the analogy, discussions become confessionals in which participants are encouraged to self-flagellate and prostrate themselves before the holy writ of self-awareness. Shame and self-deprecation are encouraged to keep non-oppressed groups in their place and subvert the social pyramid of oppression with oppressed groups at the top. Absolute fucking bullshit. So let's look at that. I came across somebody on TikTok a couple of years ago who said, everything is racist. And you don't know where to step. And my response to him was, stop being racist. deconstruct your racism. Thank you, Cutlery Crew Keeper, for the squishes, purrs, and emotional support. Kniffies. And right back at you. He was complaining that everything that a white man says or does is racist, or is viewed as racist. And my response to him, aside from stop being racist, was, you're just react to it and what they do about that racism and the consequences of it. Thank you. Racism. When, we don't want self-flagellation. We don't want people to prostrate themselves, as he says. What we want is for people to work at anti-racism. What we want is for our own people to work at anti-racism as white people work on anti-racism. We want everybody to deconstruct everything that has been done to the society by white supremacy, patriarchy, capital, to be dismantled in a way that lets people understand this is what it's done, this is how it manifests, this is what it is doing to us in society, and this is how we can fix it. So his reaction is very, very white man about it. He's like, oh, we can't do anything right. It's like those men during the height of the Me Too movement, the men who said, oh, we can't talk to women anymore. That's an abusive tactic, by the way, to say, oh, we can't do anything. It's akin to that, how men reacted in such a way that just made them seem like the perpetual victim. It's turning the perpetrator mentality that whiteness holds to the victims of whiteness. Upset by conversations about white privilege that were happening at the time, left-wing writers drew the conclusion that those affected by racism were actually the most privileged because talking about the effects of racism somehow gave them the moral high ground. Fuck that noise. This left-wing writer was angrier at people's reactions to racism than racism itself, which is a usual thing that we come across in especially white male circles. Like, don't call me racist, then stop being racist. If a person living under the weight of racism wanted to discuss the issues with like-minded people, they might form a group for that purpose. They might opt to call that group a safe space. The concept of a safe space isn't too outlandish. When it comes to race, it could be anywhere that you felt safe enough to discuss your frustrations about whiteness of the world without fear of being ostracized. It might be a specific moment in your living room with a relative, over lunch with a close colleague, or a specially convened activist space. But in the middle of the backlash against any and all anti-racist organizing, the phrase safe space became another target for white privilege's rage. Oh, how people love to wield that as a weapon. Like, oh, you need a safe space. Yeah, we need a space away from whiteness. And if I'm telling you that I need a safe space where you're not involved, that means that you're not a safe person. It's about whiteness claiming to be the victim all the time. Safe spaces is a direct corollary of the rise of identity politics, wrote Ian Dunt in The Guardian. As the essentially economic argument between right and left died down, it was replaced by a culture war in which gender, sexuality, and race were at the heart of the discussion. This is the work of privileged, moneyed, overeducated, pampered middle-class liberal idiots, added feminist writer Julie Bindel in the same article. It's utter fucking nonsense. Regardless of somebody's economic politics or gender politics, you will always find where they truly lie on the political spectrum when it comes to race. That is something that will always out them as whether they are truly for all people or they just care about their own. I have often had white people get in touch with me using the words of Martin Luther King Jr. in attempts to prove to me that my work is misguided and that I'm doing it wrong. In emails and tweets, I'm told that MLK wanted a world in which people were judged not on the color of their skin but the content of their character. The intent of these messages suggests to me that these well-wishers believe that, in today's context, these words are best suited to mean that white people should not be judged on the color of their skin, that the power of whiteness as a race should not be judged. What those who get in touch with me don't seem to realize, though, is that published in the June 1963 issue of Liberation magazine and written from a prison cell in Birmingham, Alabama, MLK Jr. also mused, "First, I must confess that over the past few years I have been gravely disappointed with the white moderate. I have almost reached the regrettable conclusion that the Negro's greatest stumbling block in its stride towards freedom is not the white citizens' counselor or the KKK, but the white moderate who is more devoted to order than to justice, who prefers a negative peace, which is the absence of tension, to a positive peace, which is the presence of justice, who constantly says, 'I agree with you in the goal you seek, but I can't agree with your methods of direct action,' who paternalistically feels he can set the timetable for another man's freedom, who lives by the myth of time, and who constantly advises the Negro to wait until a more convenient season." And this is something that Jesse Williams said in his BET speech in 2016. Freedom is always coming in the hereafter. Shallow understanding from people of goodwill is more frustrating than absolute misunderstanding from people of ill will. Lukewarm acceptance is much more bewildering than outright rejection. And that is essentially it. There's this constant sense of like, hey, not like that. Coming from people who have never felt racism. Something I said, if you don't follow Watch My Legs, please go and do so. She is amazing. I've learned so much from her. It was in her live, we were talking about the role of violence in revolution. And I said to her, those who think that violence is never the answer have never had to fight for their lives. In February 2014, political magazine The Economist published an excited editorial on the rise of mixed-race Britain. Using consensus data, the piece took an in-depth look at trends across the UK pertaining to mixed-race children. Mixed-race people were the fastest-growing ethnic group in Britain since 2001, the magazine wrote, with 6% minority group in the country. For the young, the article concluded, who are used to having people of all backgrounds in their midst, race already matters far less than it did for their parents. In a generation or two more of the melting pot, it may not matter at all. That is a racist talking point. Oh, B. Sean and I have been friends for 5 years now. And she and I have worked a lot together. And every single word that she has said, verbiage, that is a white supremacist talking point, though. it is a white supremacist talking point to say race won't matter. This is post-racial society. Hopefully one day we'll all be so mixed race that it wouldn't matter. It is rooted in erasure. It is rooted in the denial of the right that people of color have to racial and cultural, linguistic freedom. So what these white people are saying, yeah, I've always said no purpose flower. So what they're saying is that white people will continue to make race a problem until there's no race to worry about. That's what they're saying underneath it all. That you will never be good enough until you are as close to whiteness as you can be. Hi, Taro. Thank you so much. No worries, B. In Britain's biggest cities, mixed-race friendships and relationships are now routine rather than controversial. I wouldn't say that. I wouldn't say that they're controversial. I would say that they are begrudgingly routine, if anything. But increasingly, mixed-race Britain makes race relations more complicated, not less. Although nowadays people are much less afraid of living with and loving each other, the problems of racism aren't going to go away. Despite all of the joys and teachable moments of living cheek to cheek, mixed-race children are not going to end racism through their mere existence. White privilege is never more pronounced than in our intimate relationships, close friendships, and families. Race consciousness is not contagious, nor is it inherited. If anything, an increase in mixed-race families and mixed-race children brings those difficult conversations about race and whiteness and privilege closer to home, literally, than ever before. No longer can the injustice be quietly ignored by switching off the news and closing the front door. Talking to Jessica, who is mixed-race, is enlightening. We spoke at length about white privilege and family and the messy, sometimes deeply painful nature of talking about race with your nearest and dearest. Because of the sensitive nature of our conversation and fact that she still has to maintain these relationships, I've changed her name for the purposes of this book. These are difficult conversations to have. It's quite raw, she says. I've grown up mainly around my white family. The black side of my family has been affected by domestic violence, which has affected how involved that side of my family has been. For the majority of my 30 years, until the age of 28, I didn't talk about race with my white family. My mom's white and dad's black, and rarely both my mom and dad have brought me up in a kind of colorblind way. Unlike me, Jessica can't choose to just stop talking to white people about race. She doesn't have the option. She doesn't have the option of desensitizing herself from these discussions because her mum and half of her extended family are all white. As I've grown older and I understand race a bit more as a mixed-race woman, I identify as black. I have not been prepared for the things as a mixed-race woman out of the world, explains Jessica. Now I've started to have conversations about race with my family. It's uncomfortable because just when I think they've avoided it, just because I think they just avoided it. When I was younger, they pretended like it wasn't an issue. When I've been talking to my mom about it, she said she never thought it was an issue because I never seemed to have any problems growing up. There were never any racist incidences. And I was like, yes, but racism is more than a one-off incident. It's about the world you live in, the way you experience your environment. Toasted toast with chocolate spread. Toasted toast. So you re-toast the toast. It really is about the way in which you experience the world, how you move in the world, and how that world responds to you. It's the everyday experiences of living in a politicized body, a racialized body, a gendered body, a body of the global majority, a body of the global south. Living in a world that privileges one over the other in every aspect. Oh, I'm sorry, B, you said toasted toast. So I thought you have a slice of toasted bread and then you retoast it. So it's toasted toast. Throughout my childhood and my early adult life, I had a feeling of being different, a bit strange. I could never quite understand why I felt out of place. Now that I'm older, I understand. I asked Jessica about some of the difficult conversations she's been having. Recently, she replied, my uncle and cousin have been they've been really racist. Sharing things on Facebook, sharing Britain First stuff, sharing stuff about ban the burqa. I've been trying to have conversations with them about why that's racist and why it's hurtful to me as well. And I'm just not getting anywhere. They see me talking about race as if I'm the problem, as if I'm the troublemaker. It's caused me to distance myself over the past couple of years from my white family. I don't really see them anymore. I couldn't deal with them not understanding where I'm coming from. And it's not that they don't understand, because as soon as because they absolutely believe that racism against white people exists. But they will never say that it's racist when it's happening to a person of color, because they know it's by white hands. Later, she confides, as I've become more conscious in terms of race and where I am in the world, they've become more distant. I know that they're uncomfortable with me. My sister feels it as well. The more I've become myself, the less comfortable they feel around me. It's sad, because we used to be very close, but I just avoid family get-togethers now. The more you become yourself, the less they can abuse you, the less they can take advantage of you, and you realize the less they know you. I've stopped talking to my father's family entirely. Thank you. Extended family can be avoided, but what about one of the closest relationships in a person's life? What about her relationship with her mother? She does get a bit defensive, says Jessica. She said to me, I feel like you're forgetting that you're white as well. And I was like, yeah, Mom, but relationship, because I love her and I want her to accept me. But also she does come out with stuff that's racist, and it's very painful. My mom, she's completely blinded by her whiteness a lot of the time. She just thinks, I can't believe someone can be that biased. She can't imagine institutional bias. So you have to start with the basics. I can't do that with all my family, you know. It's exhausting. I've lost friends over the years, and that's okay. I mean, when they turned out to be racist, it wasn't easy to say goodbye to them, but it was necessary. Can you hear my husband snoring? This man. Be back in a second. I need to go and wake him up. Sorry, love. I said sorry, love. Why? Because I had to wake you up.
Yeah, I still
I know. Justin. Yeah. Um, I call him a rhinoceros. It's about her Jamaican was about her Jamaican dad and played into racial stereotypes. I remember once she made a comment about black men and the size of their penises. And how it was true because of my dad, and I was like, Mom, you don't know how fucked up saying that is. I certainly feel a lot of love for my mom, Jessica says with certainty. Certainty. We have a close relationship. We speak to each other all the time. But she does make me angry when she doesn't understand things. She's making small moves, but in the past I've had to protect her from my anger. Oh, that's powerful. Having to protect people from your anger at something that they have done. Oof. And I want to ask the people of color here, how many times, as an Indigenous person, how often do you feel the need to protect people from your anger at whiteness? And have you guys thought about how whiteness manifests in your life? Can I speak my truth to my mother? Even after she said something, I feel like I couldn't get angry with her, but then weeks after, I feel like calling her up and starting an argument about something just to get my anger out. I have to divert the rage to something else. Oh, and that's so true. Every single black indigenous person of the global majority has had to bottle up anger at so many things that we feel like we're going to explode. And redirecting it is sometimes not that easy. It's a case of how do we coexist when we have so much anger, justified anger, and then chastised for feeling that anger, chastised for showing that anger. When you have to guard people against your righteous anger, what they are saying to you is that, 1, your feelings don't matter. 2, your experiences don't matter. And 3, my reality is more important than yours. I've had a lot of anger. My family just didn't consider what my needs would be as a mixed-race child. Mom and Dad, when they got married, it was an issue because interracial relationships were still controversial, I think. When they got married about 35 years ago, they did lose friends. So why didn't they think, so things like how to do my hair, things like Jamaican food, all that stuff, it's integral to growing up and knowing where you're from. And a lot of the time, when there is an interracial family, the default is to slip into whiteness. Because it's easier. Jessica tells me that she's currently in counseling and has sought out local groups comprised of mixed-race people who have had similar experiences. I've had these feelings about my identity and I've just pushed them down, deep down, and I do think they have affected my mental well-being. I've quite a few friends with white mothers who struggle as well. White mothers using the N-word and saying it's fine because they have black children. How often do we see that? I can't be racist, I have a black child. Now when I see an interracial couple, I feel uneasy. even though I'm in an interracial relationship. When I see a white parent with a mixed-race kid, I think, is that child going to get what they need? Because I didn't get what I needed. I think for white people who are in interracial relationships or have mixed-race children who adopt transracially, the only way that it will work is if they're actually committed to being anti-racist, to being humble, and to learn that they are racist, even if they don't think they are. Thanks, Manny. Of her partner, she says, he knows what I've been through. We want children together, and he's the kind of white person who will do that unlearning and unpicking. I only have a few white people left in my life like that. And I couldn't be in a relationship with a white person who wasn't. And then they don't allow that black child to learn about their history for insert reason here. Yes, that's an example of racism. Yes, it's racism exemplified, as opposed to not being racist. Yeah, there's no such thing as racial neutrality. Because what is marketed as racial neutrality, quote unquote, is whiteness, is assimilationism. It is the expectation of assimilation into whiteness. The conversation about race in this country is limited, and the conversation about mixed-race people is very limited. There are people thinking that if you're half and half, you can only ever be stuck between two worlds. I used to worry about not being black enough, but I'm starting to feel that I'm part of the diversity of blackness. There's more than one way of being black. And I'm going to add to that by saying there's only one way to be white. Jessica and her mother's relationship is nuanced, at once deeply loving and deeply painful. It speaks to a number of complexities about racism, showing a truth that is often left out in clunky media coverage, that that it is not enacted by malicious monsters driven by ill will, but happens by way of whiteness. Rather than mixed-race relationships proving that society is over race, they prove that people's actions often move faster than social progress itself. It makes sense that interracial couples might not want to burden themselves with the depressing weight of racial history when planning lives together. But a colorblind approach makes life difficult for the children who do not deserve this carelessness. It seems that in the same way long-term couples might discuss marriage, money, and children, couples of different heritage must discuss race. What it means to them, how it currently affects their lives, and how it might affect their future children. In among the ending racism confetti being strewn upon mixed-race families is the suspicious eye of busybodies who can't quite understand the setup. Anecdotally, I hear from adult children of other mixed-race families who tell me that as children, they've been stopped and questioned in the street when I fucking hate that. And there's little talk of white privilege in transracial adoption, when children of color are adopted by white families. I am against transracial adoption, just by the way, to get that out there. Transracial adoption should not exist. In 2010, journalist Joseph Harker wrote, "My own Nigerian father abandoned my Irish mother before I was born. 3 years later, she married an English local who later adopted me, and I took his name. I was never short of love, support, and encouragement, but when race regularly collided with my life, I was ill-prepared. I found it difficult to cope with the playground and classroom taunts, and as I grew older, the disconnect with my African heritage became more of an issue. I've spoken to many black people of similar upbringing, and they often talk of the same experiences." His words strikes at the heart of the issue. There is nothing to suggest that a black child with a white parent or who is adopted into a white family won't be on the receiving end of immeasurable love and support. But having never experienced it, the parents might not be well equipped to deal with the racism their child will receive. They will never understand the racism that their child is ultimately going to receive, even by them. In 2012, the ultimate act of color blindness former Prime Minister David Cameron laid out his plans to remove the legal requirement for local authorities to consider a child's racial, cultural, and linguistic background during the adoption process. The move was not without goodwill. In 2013, the Department for Education told the press that black and ethnic minority children are adopted on average a year later than white counterparts. The longer a child is in care, the more likely it is that they will develop attachment problems later in life. So finding a good family fit with speed is critical. If there is a loving family ready and able to adopt a child, then Education Secretary Michael Grove said, issues of ethnicity must not stand in the way. It was with a cunning linguistic sleight of hand that these politicians insisted that considering a child's race was actually fueling racism, with Grove's remarks implying that the fact that black children waited much longer to be adopted was because of politically correct barriers that Cameron branded state multiculturalism had put in place rather than systemic racism. They will do backflips and not just mental gymnastics, but fold themselves into pretzels to deny systemic racism. Why black children wait longer to be adopted is not something easily explained, but we do live in a world riddled with racism, and these waits indicate another blow to black child's life chances. Meanwhile, white parents who adopt children of color take on a new responsibility to be race aware. They embark on a new journey of self-discovery, and they have a duty to no longer commit to the limiting politics of color blindness. They have a duty because a black child cannot be burdened with the responsibility of weathering the world's prejudices all on their own. Not all white parents take the time to learn. I would say most. Sadly, I've met white parents of mixed-race children who have angrily confronted me, insisting that they just don't see race and telling me that what I'm doing isn't helping at all. Of course, I don't demand that they agree with every point I make, but I do think that it is important that they recognize that we are still living in a racist society. If only so they can counsel their children with some ease, not for their sake, but their kids' sake. I do believe that it is the least they can do. On the flip side, I've also met white parents of mixed-race kids who express a real eagerness to understand what their child will face. These are efforts to bridge an information gap that white people don't often have to make. Pretending that everything is fine helps no one. Because it's not fine. Let's see, how much of this chapter do we have to go? 3 pages. Let me take a quick break. I will be back in a few minutes to read the last 3 pages, because that section was quite long. I shall be back. Silence does ensure its survival through fear. Fear of being fired, fear of being ostracized, fear of being assaulted when we call out racism. Into silence. My screen was too bright. I thought it was why I'm no longer talking about race. Oh, that was intentional for the cover design, by the way. The two white people being the same color as the cover. So yeah, we're bullied into silence because we have to coddle white people's anger at us. Thank you. I actually need to redo them. And here comes the puzzle piece. Yeah, we have to coddle white people's feelings about when they say or do something racist towards us. I find myself less willing to guard myself against their ire these days. And I've been ostracized. I definitely have been ostracized. Puzzle piece. Oh, TikTok has this thing where if it perceives it as too static for too long, then you have to do the whole "Are you human?" test. Autism speaks, yes. There, that is the most annoying puzzle piece. Despite the title of this book, I knew I couldn't write about race without speaking to at least one white person who thinks about race as much as I do. Jennifer Crace is an American, but has lived in the UK for the past 7 years. She is a white immigrant in Britain, which makes her both an outsider and insider. An outsider because her country has its own culture and its own well-documented racism, and an insider because her white Americanness will have her positioned as an expat rather than an immigrant. She's refreshingly self-aware about all of this. I think white people get defensive when you call them white, she tells me over Skype, because they've internalized a message that goes it's rude to point out somebody else's race, and dangerous territory because you might inadvertently be racist, because they could take offense at the mention of race. That's a really bizarre, circuitous logic that doesn't touch on the underlying issue. I asked about her early conceptions of racism as she navigated the world as a white child. Being white, Jenny would have probably gone to school where she was among other white children. And although children always find something to bully each other about, being white, Jenny won't have experienced racism on the playground. Originally, she says, I just thought you shouldn't use certain words. Colorblindness was something that was definitely taught to us in school. Growing up, I would have told you that racism is about calling... Now that sounds ridiculous to me, but that was my simplistic understanding. Jill? Hello? Adele? You're sleeping. Okay, good night. I love you. You're handsome. Did you bring up the things? No, don't. Just tell me where it is. That was my very simplistic understanding, that racism was individual, and I would not have seen systemic things. Jenny grew up in the town of Fort Worth in the state of Texas. I asked her about when she became peripherally aware of race in her life. Oh, that's an interesting one. Circuitous. Thank you, Taro. I am that person who reads words and never hears them said because I don't go outside. So I end up mispronouncing so many words. We have these conversations in BIPOC anti-racist spaces, or in spaces discussing race. A lot of us are asked, when did you first realize your race? Like, when did you first experience racism?
Basket top.
Thank you.
Go.
I love you. Good night. And my listeners say good night too. You're handsome. I want to ask the white people here, when did you first realize your whiteness? And when did you first realize the power of that whiteness? Race was something I was always aware of, just not in relation to myself. I thought race was something that applied to other people who are not white, basically. Texas, she says, has always been racially charged. There's always been racial divides between English, non-English, Latine. Fort Worth is a divided city, not only in terms of geography, but also life outcomes for people. Oof. Way too old, to be honest. Adulthood, yeah. I hate correcting pronunciation, but I know the prejudice that comes from people who use it as an ad hominem, yes, to continue to be hateful. I try and focus on the content of the subject, yes. I was one of those people who would correct people on their grammar and spelling and all of that stuff, but realizing just how rooted in colonialism that was, I stopped. People don't realize the differences in life outcomes that race can dictate. I had an argument with somebody. He was a very close friend when we were at university. Been through a lot together. Jokingly responded, and structural racism. He came at me so horribly. That I had to take a step back and leave. Sorry about that, Discord. I don't know what happened there. This year, Tarot, yeah, after finding Santana, Erica, and I and others. I'm not proud of how long it took me, but I'm proud that I'm finding my way out. It's important. It really is important. Yes, my love?
Sunday afternoon, are we doing anything?
Not to my knowledge.
Barry's invited me to a Mensa quiz. One of their friends pulled out.
Okay. I'm asleep.
Well, it's like 1 p.m, so...
I'm still going to be asleep.
Okay. Oh, because you're going jolling.
I'm going jolling on Saturday. Yes, I am.
Okay. And then the thing on the 16th was... Irene wanted to go meet up at a market.
Right. I'm keen. Good.
Okay, love you, bye.
Love you, bye. And that's the important thing, is that realization happens. God, my back is so fucked right now. Can somebody please come over and give me a back massage? Who is the closest person to me in this chat? I think that's AC, and AC is forever busy. Everything about her heavily monoracial upbringing was comfortably calculated, Jenny explained. I lived in a reality, deliberately sheltered on a lot of fronts. Not only living, I guess, deliberately around other white people and white communities. My school that I went to was majority white, also fairly middle class. The neighborhoods around the school were fairly affluent. These were all different factors that led me to being in a specific environment. Cycle over the Indian Ocean. Anesthetic in that's a bit much, B. I don't think any of that was accidental. None of it was accidental. apartheid planning in our cities. It wasn't accidental. B, you know I'll never mute you. My parents buying a house. You look at the neighborhoods, you look at the schools, and you make decisions based on your own criteria, some of which may be overtly racist or classist. I want my kid to have a good school. What does a good school mean? Given her background, I wondered how her stance on race could be so drastically changed from then till now. In my experience, a white person who has had an almost all-white upbringing brings with them an insularity, a reflexive urge to defend whiteness when it is criticized. Oh, yeah. At what point in her life did she first realize she was white? I had a lecturer whose class was unbelievably challenging for me because he talked about race like he talked about imperialism. That was my first exposure, not just to the fact of it, but to politically challenging historical viewpoints on it. At the time, I was really resistant. Thinking back to what I said now, I just fucking cringe at it, because that really planted the seeds of change for me. At first, she was defensive. I think what made me feel defensive is that I was embarrassed that there was a chance that someone knew something I didn't, or on some level, maybe I could sense that accepting whatever that person was saying would open a can of worms. Ooh, that is important. An indignation. I've lost a lot of sensitivity about being told I'm wrong. That's a massive gain on a personal level. I haven't lost my white privilege. It hasn't reduced because I suddenly understand what it is. I was curious to learn how Jenny's anti-racist politics affected the rest of her life. I discuss racism with my family and friends in a work context, though these discussions can be difficult. In the last 3 or 4 years, I've had a few mega fails where that is concerned, where I've either picked the wrong discussion to have or passed up the chance to have a discussion that was essential. I'm trying to do more things with my ordinary day-to-day life that aren't in activist spaces, to bring issues up when they are relevant at the time, because I don't know what the other people in the room are thinking. But if I'm thinking that no one else is saying it, then it's on me to say something. Being accountable for that, really only to myself. Doing things when there's nobody there to see it. Because it's not really about somebody witnessing it or patting me on the back. Enjoy the Duolingo? I'm going to say that we don't need white saviors. We don't need people to save us from whiteness. What does help, though, is the white people who are willing to put themselves in between us talking about whiteness and racism and doing the anti-racist work, and the people who will harm us. Not trying to save us, but defending us. We don't need to be taken out of that situation. We do need to be of that speaking out. Kicking up a storm when a Black, Indigenous, or person of the global majority is fired from their job for discussing race. Not being afraid to go head to head with whiteness when we are too tired to, when we are not in a socioeconomic position to. Understanding that white accomplices are necessary. Understanding that anti-racism is 24/7 work. And I don't care whether you call yourself an ally, you call yourself an accomplice, a word is just a word. I care about whether you are doing the work. It is not about the title. I would rather call you a friend. I would rather call you a comrade. It's unusual that Jenny is willing to do the heavy work of dismantling racism. Frankly, it's unusual because she is white. So many white people that racism is not their problem. But white privilege is instrumental to racism. When I write about white people in this book, I don't mean every individual white person. I mean whiteness as a political ideology. A school of thought that favors whiteness at the expense of those who aren't. To me, it's like yin and yang. Racism's legacy does not exist without purpose. It brings with it not just disempowerment for those affected by it, but an empowerment for those who are not. That is white privilege. Racism bolsters white people's life chances. It affords unearned power. It is designed to maintain quiet dominance. Why don't white people think they are racialized and have a racial identity? I hate that she's done this. I don't mean every individual white person. Because every individual white person is racist. Because every individual white person benefits from racism. And we don't exist in a vacuum. Any questions? That is the chapter. Next week, Tuesday, we'll be starting chapter 4. Actually, when will I be closing for the year? Oh no! I'm ending everything, all the readings and everything on this Friday. So next week we won't be. I'm gonna be on holiday as of next week, Monday, actually. I'm taking a break. I know that is very, very weird. But I am going to be taking a break. But yeah, I'm very excited about going into this new year with a lot more knowledge, a lot more understanding, and going this journey with you. I shall see you all tomorrow. 2 bachelors, well done, Taro. I'm so freaking proud of you. But yeah, got to go to another meeting. It was good read. Thank you. Talk to you later. Thank you so much, Gonzo, for always being here. All the love. Appreciate you. And see you tomorrow. See if you can donate to my virtual tip jar. We're still very low on this goal. Orientalism. But please go to my link tree. I've got a lot of resources there. So many other people have their fundraisers and their Discord servers. Please join Proletariat's Lighthouse. It's really important work that Proletariat is doing there. Let's support our comrades, because 2 people had to unsubscribe from Patreon for financial reasons, so please see if you can. Yeah. It's not in my YouTube bio, no. I'm going to rectify that today. And so, yeah, see if you can support me in any way. And I know that it's it's a difficult financial time for everyone. But yeah, thank you so much for being here. I'm going to continue on the tiki-talkie for a few more minutes. And Twitch and YouTube, I shall see y'all tomorrow. Cheerio.